And thanks for joining us today. Erin, do you want to?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Erin Bloodgood, she, her, hers. I am the communications manager for Wisconsin Conservation Voices.
And this is part one of a two-part training. So this is kind of the more introduction level look at social media. Part two, we will include a link to that at the end of this presentation, and we'll tell you a bit about what else we'll be covering. Okay, so today we'll talk about why you should use social media, why it's a good thing to invest your time in. We'll go through some definitions, kind of sort out difference between a retweet, a reshare, what's a DM, that sort of stuff. And then we'll talk about balancing the workload of social media, how to not overextend yourself. And then we'll dive into the pros and cons of each platform. I think we're talking about 5 or 6 different platforms, and we'll tell you about the benefits of each one, and kind of that way you can pick which two or three platforms to really focus your time on. Then we'll give you some tips for amplifying and extending your reach on those platforms. And then we'll have lots of time at the end for questions and answers. Okay, so why should I use social media? So when using social media for your organization's platform, it's a good idea to just kind of use it as you use your own personal platform, whether that's connecting with friends and family, boosting, like you boost the good things your friends and family do. So boosting your partner's work, other organizations' work, connecting with people, comment, liking, and sharing. So on social media, you want to make sure that you're serving your audience. So if you're just posting things like donate to our organization, really, especially if you're asking for donations or just kind of throwing in a link in there, you're not really serving your audience. So the best way to boost engagement, and by engagement, I mean likes, comments, shares, is to make sure your content is benefiting your audience. So there are 3 reasons why people might use social media. So number 1 is to inform your audience. So some examples of this are sharing a link to a news story. If there's a court case decision, your news organization sends out a press release to your media contacts, sharing that out on social media. So making sure your audience, people who are interested in your organization's mission, are informed on these timely decisions. Number 2 is to educate. So this is kind of like how-to videos that you might find on YouTube. So an example of this for voting rights might be sharing a video on how to request an absentee ballot. So in the voting rights work, there's a lot of how to navigate my vote, how to get voter ID, that sort of thing. And then number 3 is to connect with your audiences. So for example, sharing events, making sure people are connected in your community. This is also a great way to connect with other organizations who have a similar mission, boosting their content, talking to each other over social media, connecting with individuals who are maybe interested in joining. So just really using your organization's account as you would use your own personal account to grow and create relationships. Okay, so now we'll just go over some definitions. So the first is reshare, retweet, and quote tweet. So a reshare is when you're sharing someone else's content to your own page. So like when I said you're boosting other organizations' messages, their work, you're boosting it to your own audience by resharing it on your page. And then a retweet is the same exact idea, but it's on Twitter, of course. You're retweeting someone else's message and putting it on your profile for your audience to see. And then a quote tweet is kind of the same thing as a retweet. It's almost like a tweet inside of a tweet. You're retweeting someone else's message, and then you're kind of adding your own message above it. So just adding a little additional context. And you can do a similar thing on Facebook, boosting someone else's message, adding your own context. Organic. So organic is the opposite of ads that you might do on social media. So it's not paid promotion. And so when we talk about organic growth, which we're mostly going to be talking about today, because we're not really going to get into ads too much, we're talking about how you can boost your engagement, how you can build an audience without using any money. And then stories. So how to differentiate between a story and a post is that a story is something that has a time limit on it. So on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, a story is something that usually is up for 24 hours. Usually it appears at the top of someone's feed. And so it's good if you're doing maybe like a countdown or a Q&A, something that you might not want posted on your profile for indefinitely.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick to say that with stories, I generally think about the different ways you might use stories versus a regular post. I like to think of stories as maybe the behind the scenes content, like what's the behind the scenes shot that's like more personalized for your audience, or what's like a current thing that's happening in the moment that people might want to tap into. So that's how I think of how you might want to use them differently than a regular post.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also with stories, they're kind of fun just to play around with. There are different features, for example, like Instagram stories, you can actually link, which you usually can't link on Instagram. There are fun features, like I mentioned, a countdown feature. And it is a good way to do different types of content like behind the scenes, like Erin said. Okay, next is direct message, mostly called a DM. So this is a private conversation that you might have on social media. You can also like DM through Zoom. Right now, it's that same idea. It's a private conversation. So for example, you might DM someone on Twitter, you might DM a journalist on Twitter, building those relationships. If you like what another organization is doing, you might want to DM them and let them know that, or ask to use their content. So it is a good way to build those relationships. Followers, pretty self-explanatory. A follower is a user who has subscribed to your account and can receive your updates. Hashtag, we'll talk about this a little more later when we're talking about amplifying your reach, but essentially it's like hashtag, word, and it's a way to categorize information. So like hashtag be a voter, hashtag freedom to vote. And users can click on those hashtags and kind of sift through other related content that also uses that hashtag. And like when we do hashtags for tweet storms, it's a good way to show like a coalition building, everyone's working together. And it's also a really good way to gauge metrics and see what else is out there. Erin, do you have anything to add for these ones?
Yeah, not much. We'll talk about hashtags later, like you said, but using hashtags is also a great search tool. A lot of people in Instagram, for instance, in the explore feature of Instagram, will find new content by searching for a hashtag. So, we'll talk later about using well-known hashtags in combination with more personalized hashtags that we create as a coalition.
And then a tag. So tagging is when you link back to a person or organization's profile. So for example, on like Facebook or Instagram, if you post a picture of a friend, or maybe you post a picture of an organization's event, you can tag them, linking back to their profile to let people know this is who is involved in this. It's a good way to help them get followers, bring people to their page. Trending. So I think trending is most commonly known on Twitter, but also just kind of a general idea of trending. So it's when a topic or hashtag are increasing in popularity. So for example, if it's like a big event or like, I don't know, the Super Bowl or something, hashtag Super Bowl might be trending that day. And it's a good way for you to kind of keep track of what people are talking about, what people want to know about, and engage in that conversation. And then live streaming. So live streaming, as you all probably know by now, is when a user delivers content in real time. So a Facebook live stream is just going on Facebook and seeing a video of someone talking, and that is in real time. So like I'm streaming to you all right now. You can do that on a lot of different social media platforms.
Cool. Thanks, Molly. I'll jump on now. So now we're going to talk about picking the platforms that you use. First, before we talk about and dive into each platform and its benefits, and who uses those specific platforms, I also want to talk about, as people in the nonprofit world, we often have many roles in our jobs. So I want to make the point that we don't have to be on every single social media platform. Sometimes I know it's easy to think that and think it's important to reach as many people as possible. But the truth is, if we don't have the time to be on those platforms, if we don't have the time to do them well, then it's actually hurting us more than it's helping us. So we'll go through each of the platforms because certain platforms might be better for different organizations, for different people to use, depending on the goals of your organization. And I just want to stress to not overextend yourselves and don't try to be on every single platform, because it's just not possible to do. I know everybody talks about TikTok, and maybe it makes sense for your specific organization because of the audience you're trying to reach or the specific content you're putting out. But I'll speak for my organization, Wisconsin Conservation Voices. We choose not to be on TikTok because we just don't have the capacity to put out constant videos and have a real presence on that platform. So we prefer to focus more of our efforts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But I'll go through each of the platforms and we'll talk about Facebook, we'll talk about Twitter, we'll talk about Instagram, we'll talk about Nextdoor, YouTube, and then we'll also talk about live streaming. So first I'll cover Facebook. So can I have a couple of you, if you're willing to, raise your hand real quick or come off mute and just tell me, why do you use Facebook? What, just for your own personal use, what's the draw of using Facebook? Or how do you engage on Facebook? I can go first. I'll say that I generally, I like to interact with my family. I like to post photos about, trips I've been on to kind of update family and be aware of events happening in the community. Ernestine, did you have something to say?
Mine is, I actually attend church on Facebook. That's my biggest use of it.
Cool. So would you say you use it to kind of, be part of that community?
Yes.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Carlene?
Plus, I really try to watch what's trending in the areas that I'm curious about and interested in. So I share a lot of stuff with family and friends, but then also just to keep up.
Cool, love that. And Delaney?
I like to use it because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation on Facebook, and I like to use it to post factual information. So that kind of clouds the disinformation that maybe people I'm friends with, so they might see information that's actually factual rather than misinformation.
Cool, thanks for sharing. And then Judith, we'll have you go last. Go ahead.
I don't use it personally. I used to. I really dislike it, so I'm having a hard time. But at League of Women Voters, we must use it because we have, right now, we're trying to, the reason that we're here is we're trying to have a younger, expand our members to include younger people. But right now, most of the people who are in League of Women Voters only use Facebook. So that's
Cool.
why we use Facebook.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you all for sharing that. All right, I'm gonna read off a few statistics for you all for Facebook, and I think I was reading through these today. I thought it was pretty interesting. So for Facebook users, the largest demographic group of Facebook users is between the ages of 25 and 35. Around 7 in 10 US adults, so 69%, use Facebook. 75% of online users with an income more than 75K are on Facebook. And 81% of Facebook users only access the platform via mobile devices. So I just wanted to read those out to kind of give us some grounding of who uses Facebook, you know, in a general term, and thinking about as we're using Facebook, who are we actually talking to? So I think it's important every once in a while to look up some of those statistics and just be conscious of the people who are actually using Facebook, especially when you're trying to figure out who's your audience and who you're trying to reach. As far as people using Facebook or why they use it, I mean, Facebook is a place where we can talk to people in a really genuine way. It's often people, like Ernestine said, you know, connecting with their community and keeping up with friends, tapping into things happening on a local level, maybe searching for events in their area. So as Molly kind of started off this training, she talked about why people use social media in general. People use social media literally as a digital social network. Like, think about how we use our social media platforms on a personal level. And we use it basically to engage with community, with friends, and have a social network. So just when you're using this for your organization or for your business, think about why people use it. And just think about this literally being a digital social network. So you should be using it in the same way. So when talking about Facebook, what should you be posting? One, you should be engaging with people, you know, commenting. I'll probably keep repeating this, but commenting on other people's posts, you know, having conversations with people, liking other organizations pages, liking their posts. Like I said, using this as a social media or like a social tool. But other things to post, you know, posting educational content, ask questions in your post, post surveys, and that gets people a little bit more engaged in your post. Share articles, share events from other organizations. Don't just post things about what your content is, you know, share other people's posts so that you can like give other organizations and other people shout outs. And like I said before, start conversations with your followers. So we try to post a lot more. Whenever I'm putting out posts, I try to think of like, how can I get responses from people? If you're just posting something like, you know, please go to this webpage, that's not very engaging. But if you say, you know, I'm trying to think of an example, but posing something as a question that people might respond to, and then kind of finishing the post with, you can find more information at this webpage, that might be a slightly more engaging version of that. And then I also want to talk about Facebook groups a little bit. So a lot of us, our organization included, we have basically business pages with Facebook, but Facebook has a really annoying algorithm that notices when we have business pages and makes our posts a lot harder to see. Facebook basically wants us to pay to play. It wants us to pay for advertisements to get our posts seen. However, with Facebook groups specifically, people will like a Facebook group or join a Facebook group based on their interests. So I know that there's a camping, like a Wisconsin State Parks camping Facebook group that a lot of people are engaged in. There's a lot of neighborhood specific Facebook groups where people just in that neighborhood will post about events happening or free stuff that they need to get rid of. But the point is, Facebook groups, people are already there based on their interest. So you essentially have a captive audience of people that have already chosen to be there. So you can, I highly recommend everybody here to do some research on what Facebook groups already exist. You know, if it's specific to voting, seeing if there are Facebook groups already out there around voting or around being involved in racial justice. Like I know that there's a Showing Up for Racial Justice Facebook group that's based in the Milwaukee area, where people always post about marches that are happening or ways you can write your legislators. And if not, create a Facebook group that is based on interest. That way, people are in that group rather than just being a business posting all the time. You kind of start to build a community. So look into the power of Facebook groups. One statistic on that, over 1.8 billion Facebook users have joined groups. And then last thing I'll talk about with Facebook are Facebook ads. Like I said before, Facebook makes it so that you kind of have to pay to play. As businesses, I get that we are organizations, but we have business pages in Facebook. So with the algorithm, it makes it really hard for us to get our posts seen. With, you know, if we don't have people already following our pages, Facebook makes it pretty hard to spread our posts organically. So if you are, I won't go too much into Facebook ads because I could spend 3 hours on this and they are always changing the rules and making it very hard for us. But if you are going to use Facebook ads, I highly recommend using a list that you might already have. So like with our organization, we have a membership list and there's a way with Facebook ads that you can kind of download that list as a CSV file or Excel file, and then you can upload it to your Facebook ads so that it can kind of find the people, find the emails that you may already have and match it to people on Facebook. And that will get you a lot farther, I think, than trying to just narrow your search through Facebook. And we'll have more questions, or we'll have time for questions at the end. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions with this kind of stuff. But we'll move on to Twitter. So here are some facts with Twitter. I'll just read some more out for you. Most of Twitter's audience is 25 to 34 years old. So that's 38% of people are 25 to 34 years old on Twitter. People who use Twitter mostly have college degrees or more, so about 33%. 34% of Americans who use Twitter earn $75K or more, while 29% of them earn $30K to $50K. American Twitter users are more likely to be Democrats than Republicans. I'm not sure the percentage on that. And then tweets with Gifs get 55% more engagement than those without. However, only 2% of tweets contain Gifs. So some facts for you all to think about. So Twitter, think of Twitter as an online organizer or a conversation platform. So I don't know how many of your organizations have organizers in the field working in their local communities, but think of Twitter as the online version of that. And it is really a place for creating conversations. So if you're just posting Twitter posts and talking at people, then that is not really the way to be using Twitter. Like I said, when talking about Facebook, the more we're using social media as a digital social network, the more effective that we're being. And it's also, based off some of the facts I was just saying, it's a good way to engage with people who are already politically involved. So for those of us working in voting rights, that can be a great thing. However, if your audience you're trying to reach are people that are not already politically engaged, and you're trying to get more people engaged in voting, then maybe reconsider what platform you're using. But maybe you don't use Twitter the same way as you would use Facebook. If you know that you're already talking to people who are pretty politically engaged, then maybe the tone of your posts is slightly different on Twitter. And so I'll say kind of again, like I was saying before, but how to reach people, how to reach people in an organic way, rather than having to pay for posts or pay for ads, is use it as a conversation tool. Comment on other people's posts regularly. I would put just as much effort in commenting on other posts as you do posting your own. Retweet other content. And as Molly mentioned earlier, you can quote tweet where you retweet someone's tweet and then add a comment to it when you post it on your page. It kind of amplifies their work, and so it's kind of this way to mutually benefit both of you. Have conversations and then tag people. If you're giving someone a shout out, make sure to tag their page so they get a notification. They're more likely to share it if you do that. Especially journalists. Twitter is specifically the platform to use if you're trying to engage and work with journalists. I try to regularly tag journalists if I see a great story that they wrote, and give them a shout out on Twitter. Molly talked about sending DMs or direct messages. Of all people, I would say have direct messages and conversations with with journalists on a kind of on that private way. But if you're having a press release, maybe there's a few key journalists that you work with that would be worth either tagging them or sending them a direct message and say, hey, just wanted to make sure you saw that this is happening today. And last thing I'll say about Twitter is stay current. To stay relevant, tweets usually are only seen for a few hours. So just keep that in mind, that when you're commenting on things, they need to be very, very current. Next, we'll talk about Instagram. Yeah, so Instagram. All right, here's a few more statistics to throw at you all. 31% of Instagram users are 25 to 34-year-olds. 31% of Instagram users are 18 to 24-year-olds. So a younger crowd is on Instagram for sure. And 25% of US teenagers say Instagram is their preferred social media platform. So when we're talking about different platforms to use, if you're trying to engage a younger audience, Instagram is probably the way to go. And then some fun facts about Instagram. Posts with at least one hashtag average 12% more engagement. Photos with faces get 38% more likes. So if you have people in your posts, you're going to get more likes and engagement on your posts on Instagram. Not saying you need to do that for every single post, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. And then posts with a location get 79% more engagement. So when you're posting on Instagram, you can usually, you can click and say where this photo was taken. So I actually did not know that fact until I looked it up today. And then I'll also say Instagram videos get over 2 times more engagement than Instagram photos. So videos are the way to go. But basically think of Instagram as a place for visual storytelling. That's really that's really what Instagram is for. If you post great visuals, now I'm not saying you have to be a professional photographer, but if you're posting really interesting, engaging photos with groups of people to show that your organization is out doing things, or maybe you're like, as a conservation organization, that's what we do. The more nature photos we post, those tend to get engagement as well. But like, what is the story that you're telling is really the point. So you use those visuals to tell the story of your organization and what you do. Another little tip that I like to use is when I just need Instagram content. Sometimes I will screenshot a tweet that we posted and I use Canva to add a background to the tweet, and make that into an Instagram photo. It's kind of my little hack, and it's a trending thing that a lot of people are doing, and easy way to duplicate your content. And then last thing I'll say is, rather than selling to people or asking them to do something all the time, I think it's good to have a donation ask in there sometimes, or a specific call to action for people to click on. But I would say 70 to 90% of your content should be something engaging, thinking about how the content benefits your users. And once again, go back to thinking about, how do you use the platform, and how do you want to be talked to? So just think about that when you're posting. Yeah, and then we can move on to Nextdoor. So Nextdoor is like the forgotten about social media platform. I would guess that a fair number of people use Nextdoor, or at least are signed into a Nextdoor account, just to be aware of what's happening in their neighborhood. But I think specifically as people who work in the voting rights world, Nextdoor can be such an amazing tool for us to use. It's just hyper local. If we're trying to get out voting information very specific to a certain area, Nextdoor is a great way to do that. You can't really post as a business, nor would you want to. But as someone that you kind of have to put on your personal hat, and then you can post about, hey, make sure that your polling place is down the street. Here's the link to do that. But I would post about it in a very like neighborly way. Yeah, so like I was saying, it's a neighborhood specific social media site for those of you that don't know what it is. And it's really meant for people close by to meet their neighbors, update people on neighborhood concerns, and ask for local advice. And that's exactly how you should use it. Basically, think of it similar to how you might use a Facebook group, but in a more local level. Yeah, and that's all I'll say about Nextdoor. So YouTube. Also, I think in our industry, YouTube can be a pretty underutilized platform. And understandably, video is pretty time consuming to create. But I did want to highlight this briefly because YouTube can be a pretty powerful tool for what we're doing. Here are some more statistics for you all. 81% of US adults use YouTube. 81% of US adults. That is a lot of people. Everyone is on YouTube, basically. 95% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the US use YouTube. That's like, these numbers are, when I read this, it's astounding. Like, YouTube far and away is the most used social media platform and one of the most visited websites in the world, on the internet, I believe. So 95% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the US use YouTube. 91% of 30 to 49-year-olds in the US use YouTube. 49% of 65 and older people in the US use YouTube. And then 37% of millennials aged 18 to 34 are binge watching YouTube daily. And here's the statistic. YouTube is the world's second most used social media platform. So that's pretty crazy. Essentially, everyone is using YouTube. And I think I also, the other statistic I found was by 2025, it's predicted that 50% of viewers under 32 will not subscribe to paid TV. So if you're thinking about ads during the election, invest in YouTube and not TV. But basically, as far as YouTube content, people use YouTube mostly for how-to content. I don't know about you all, but if I need to fix anything in my house, I'm going to YouTube. So think about how you can, like, again, think about how you use the social media platform. And then if you're posting on it or using it, think about that when you post. I think specifically for voting rights, if we're talking about how-to content, you know, like how to return your absentee ballot, even if it's not a fancy production, even if someone's just using their phone to record a video and explain a how-to, then I think that's a great thing to post on YouTube. But just thinking of that when planning to use YouTube. So yeah, half of its users use the platform for educational content. So in other words, people go to YouTube to learn something. And so what can you post? Educational content, teaching people something about your cause, getting them by teaching people and like engaging people in educational content, you're getting them involved in the work, you're getting them interested in what you do as an organization. And it's a great way to kind of lead people eventually to your website or maybe some of your other social media platforms. And then aside from educational content, also just think of YouTube as a great way for visual storytelling. It's a great way to tell the story of your organization or of your brand. Last thing I'll talk about is live streaming. Yeah, so let's see. I'll just do one statistic. I'm sure you guys are sick of my statistics by now. But in 2019, Facebook Live had amounted to 35% of the entire platform usage of Facebook. And that was in 2019. So I'm sure now Facebook Live, a lot of people that are using Facebook are engaging in live content. So why should we live stream? You can generate engagement and participation from your audience. People can be involved in an event that's happening in the moment, which is kind of exciting. You can inform your viewers. You can allow, it's like a great way to allow more people to access your events rather than people having to travel in person. And then it's a great way to just organically promote your organization, and it shows something, what you're actively working on. Also, bonus, when you start a live feed on Facebook or Instagram, I think, or also YouTube, your followers get a notification that pops up that says you're going live. So that's great. And so for that reason, consider connecting any Zoom meetings you have that you are okay with being public on Facebook. You can connect your Zoom meetings to Facebook Live. It's especially great for any last minute participants that are just not great at signing up for things ahead of time. And then lastly, think about co-hosting events with other organizations. And when you do that, you tap into their audience as well. And it helps both of you kind of expand your reach. Yeah, and then last thing I'll talk about is amplifying your reach. We talked about some of this already, and in our second part of this training, we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of these. But thinking about amplifying your reach, how can you do that without having to pay for it? I said it before, I'll say it again. Use social media like you would engage in any other social network, whether it's in person or digital. Just thinking about how are you engaging with your own community, and think about using social media in that same way. So tag other accounts, host Facebook events. Especially Facebook events, people can find these when they're searching for events in their area. And it's a great way to get people involved that aren't already following you. And then toolkits are a really great way to amplify your reach. I mean, I do this all the time. Molly does this a lot. We'll make a social media toolkit for the Voting Rights Coalition, for our 501c4 side of our organization. We work with legislators on a regular basis. We came out with like a newsletter scorecard, and we wanted to get more engagement and reach new people to make sure more people knew about that and that it existed. So we built out just through Google Docs, we made a social media toolkit and sent that to all of the legislators that were featured in that scorecard, and we gave them sample social media posts to post about. We pre-made graphics for them, so literally all they had to do was copy and paste and post, and we asked them to tag our organization, and we got a ton of people following just from that toolkit. So especially if you're working with a lot of other people in different ways, think about creating a toolkit so that people can literally just copy and paste. And then I'll talk briefly about boosting group. So when we talk about boosting, boosting is like essentially if you're posting something, how can you get more people to follow or like or engage with that post than normally would? I got this idea from an intern we had who was I think he was 20 or something, but he had so many great new ideas. But he had us create a boosting group. So we created a Facebook messaging group where is basically 10 people from our organization in this Facebook group, and we had a specific event that we wanted to get a lot of followers for. So basically throughout the day we were planning on posting a lot of posts for this event, and anytime we posted something, he would copy the link from that post and put it in the Facebook group and say, okay, everybody comment, like, and share this post right now. And it was this great organic way, as in we didn't have to pay for anything, to amplify that post and get a lot more engagement. I mean, the way that algorithms work on the social media platforms is these platforms are paying attention to how much engagement you're already getting on a certain post. And if nothing is happening, Facebook's not going to show it to anybody. But if you have a group that sees a post, jumps on it immediately, and a whole bunch of people like and comment on it, Facebook will see that and naturally the post will be seen by more people because Facebook sees that there's already a lot of engagement with it. We did this also for a big fundraising event that we had, and we had an email chain with all of our board members and staff members, and we would post, or we would share the post in that email chain, and everybody would like and comment and share, and we got a lot more engagement that way. So definitely thinking about boosting groups. And then hashtags, we talked a lot about this already, but think about using trending hashtags. So like, Molly, what was the example you shared before? Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl. So if you're posting something about the Super Bowl, you know, use a hashtag that everybody and their brother is using that day, because then you'll kind of jump into, like, if people are searching for Super Bowl and they want to pay attention to everything that's being talked about, people will search for Super Bowl. So that's a great way for you to kind of like jump onto the trend. But also hashtags are a great way to track how many people are posting about your campaign. So for the Voting Rights Coalition, we have specific hashtags we use sometimes, like thank elected officials. If we're doing a big push one day for thanking our elected officials, we'll ask people to use trending hashtags and the one unique hashtag we came up with, because then I can search for thank elected officials and see exactly who posted. And it's just a great way to track metrics and do reporting if you need to. And then last thing I'll say is tweet storms. It's kind of the same idea of using those hashtags, but if you organize with a whole group of people and everybody posts all at the same time, then you can basically flood the airways with whatever your message is and kind of take over Twitter for an hour, which can be pretty effective. And that's it. I want to make sure we leave some space for questions. I know I went over time just a little bit. And also Molly has the link for you all to register. I can also drop that in the chat.
It's okay, and I have it right here. I just
Perfect.
Yeah, there's the QR code, and so it's on make sure I get the date right. It's on August 31st at 3 p.m. Central Time. So we hope you can join us. Sorry, now I can't find you guys. Okay, there's everyone. And we'll dive into kind of like amplifying your reach a little bit more. We'll also talk about like accessibility, just kind of like more next level topics as well. And so, cool, yeah. I'll give you guys another second if you want to get the QR code.
Do you all want to drop any questions you have in the chat, or you can also raise your hand if you want. We can try to answer questions for the last 10 minutes. Denise?
Yeah, it's not so much a question as a comment, and that is I was part of a disinformation training a couple weeks ago, and they really promoted and talked about the fact of not, unless it was a really trusted source, to not boost, do not repeat, do not forward any of those messages or posts, that there are so many disinformation groups out there now, or that there's like a few groups, but they have so many websites, Facebook pages, tweeting, Twitter, whatever they're doing, that if you copy or forward or link or whatever their message, you're giving them more airwaves. And if you respond to what they've written and saying, so-and-so wrote this and it was really wrong and it's really inappropriate, you're giving them more message time. And then that message has gone to your whole universe. So people are seeing misinformation that you're trying to discount, it's better to really write your own, bringing out key points, but not even sourcing them as like for the children said, or
Yeah.
you don't say that, you don't do that because it's a real problem. The other thing that I heard, and I'd like you guys to address this because I didn't hear, and first off, are we going to get your statistics as part of this? Because I think that's really important with regards to what we do and how we're picking media. But the other thing I heard is that women 50 years of age and older are going to be the deciders in the upcoming election. And that getting to 50-year-old women across the state of Wisconsin and engaging them in voting is going to be critical. I don't know if you've heard that. I heard it from a national team in a session that I was in, and they were really strong about that. Although I know we have some great referenda efforts on board with regards to marijuana that might get a younger voting group out.
Yeah.
But I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah. I can't speak specifically to who is going to be the deciding factor of this election. I think, I would say refer to research, like I don't know if you all are tapped into Badger State Research or other specific.
This came from Celinda Lake and Anat, and it was through All In Wisconsin and a couple of other groups of a national polling that was done and reported on.
I think that those are definitely great like places that have good research for that. To answer your question, I would say if that's who you're choosing to focus on, I think there's different groups here that will be, aiming to work with different audiences. And I would just say that if that's who you're choosing to work with or talk to, then, just do the research to figure out the platforms that make sense and figure out the tactics for your specific goals. I think different groups have different audiences that they're trying to talk to.
Right.
Just understanding who you're talking to and picking the platforms based on that. And sorry, what was the first question you were asking?
Am I right to say not to?
Sorry.
Repeat unsubstantiated posts.
So specifically with mis and disinformation, absolutely, that is correct. You do not want to rebut or respond to any of those claims. You don't want to try to correct anything that anyone. If you see misinformation, you do not want to try to correct it. Specifically with mis and disinformation, there are resources that I'm sure we'll be sharing on the listservs that you can copy the direct link to those social media posts and email them or upload them so that the specific places are notified about that. But never, when we're talking about boosting groups or sharing and tagging other accounts, that specifically is not for mis and disinformation. This is for your own positive messaging that you're trying to get out. But for sure, do not repeat any lies that you see. Just for sake of time, I'll move on. But thank you for asking that, Denise. Let's see what other questions are here in the chat.
I want to point out a conversation in the chat. Someone asked about a good application to choreograph all media so you can kind of post everything at once. And Bonnie, thanks for your response, said Hootsuite, which is the only one I've briefly used. I can't speak to any others. There are others you can try, and try like a free month-long trial to see if that works. If you have enough volunteers, it might just make more sense to kind of divvy up the platforms between volunteers with what works for everyone else.
Yeah, and
good
I
idea.
will say that Hootsuite can be very expensive. And there are a lot, if you do a quick Google search, you'll see a lot of those kind of platforms where you can share everything at once. But they do tend to be expensive. So for those of you using Canva, especially with the free pro version, you can schedule posts from Canva, especially if you're making graphics in there already. Yeah, I think for a lot of us with limited time in our or limited capacity in our organizations, I think using those shared apps is kind of hard.
Yeah, and if you're only using Facebook and Instagram, you can schedule those posts at the same time because it's all owned by the same company. So it is a good time-saving resource. And then someone asked about where to get fun, free GIFs. Again, Bonnie, thanks for your response. Jiffy, GIPHY, has some free online GIFs, and then a company called Into Action, which I can send in the follow-up email. They have really great GIFs, like voting themed, justice themed GIFs. They have lots of Wisconsin specific ones. If you see a GIF on the state league's Instagram, I did not make that. I got it from Into Action, and they're really cute and fun. So I'll include a link to them.
I see a question in here on how to join the listserv. Molly and I can drop our emails in this chat. We do have a listserv for groups interested in getting voting information and being part of some of the toolkits we send out. So you can email me or Molly and we can add you to that. Is there anything else?
Like, we have a question. How often should one post on each social media platform to be effective? I don't think there's like a right answer or a set answer. You know, you want to be consistent, I guess, to keep up engagement and to keep your followers engaged. I think, you know, if you're just posting like your own content, I think a lot of that comes down to your capacity and what you're able to take on. But that's why resharing and reposting and retweeting is so great, because it's just a simple click from a trusted news organization or a trusted partner that you can keep your feed fresh and updated without overextending yourself.
Yeah. Bonnie, did you have your hand raised?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. I was just going to share a little experience about how often to post and stuff. Really, I think the key is consistency. Just, you know, every few days post something, and over time you're going to see it grow. I've been managing an Instagram account, and of course my internet cut out when you guys were talking about Instagram, so I'll have to watch it on the recording. Anyway, just be consistent and it'll start to grow on its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And like I said, you know, if you are not able to post consistently, at least a few times a week, if not every day, then consider not having as many platforms that you're trying to keep up with.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. The second training is August 31st at 3 p.m. Central Time. I see a little confusion about that. And we'll include the registration link in the follow-up email along with the recording and other stuff. Great.
Yeah. Well, I can do one more question, but our emails are in the chat. But Carlene, did you have your hand raised?
I have a request for the next training, and that is to help us actually think about planning like a comm strategy around upcoming events or those kinds of things. If we could just kind of take a look at what that looks like, so that it's because this feels, at least I know for me, kind of overwhelming with the other things that I do. So being able to be planful about it would be really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that suggestion. We'll try to work something in for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. And we'll follow up. And like we said, our emails are in the chat if you have any other questions. And we hope we'll see you for part 2.
Thank you all. Really appreciate you coming.